All right, guys, so this is going to be lecture one on German expansion. So we're going to focus on the years 33 really to 38, and then 38 to 40 will be covered a little bit later on in a second video. The reason why is because between the years 33 and 38, Hitler's really consolidating, further consolidating his authority. We know that based off the rise slideshows that we talked about, right? And on top of that as well, it's going to be a situation where he's going to start to test the boundaries of the Treaty of Versailles. And eventually, by the time we reach 38, you're going to see him fully be eager to completely push the boundaries of the Treaty of Versailles. Not just push the boundaries, but go full expansion mode, right? He did minor things between the years 33 and 38 that allowed him to pursue slightly more aggressive policy, and we're testing the waters with Britain and France. But like I said, once you get to 38, there's going to be a situation that's going to lead to the removal of old school Prussian, meaning old school German military leaders, replaced with loyalists, and putting himself, essentially Hitler, as commander-in-chief that allow him to go for a much more aggressive foreign policy, and we'll cover that today. So, the essential questions. Examine the ways in which Hitler challenged the post-war settlement and discuss the consequences of Hitler's actions for the international situation. So our themes, what are the components of German expansion from 33 to 38? He challenged, undermined, and blocked. That's what he did. We're going to focus on the Saar plebiscite, the German rearmament, and the remilitarization of the Rhineland. We're also going to talk briefly about the Spanish Civil War, some agreements that he makes that seem counterproductive but are actually very strategic. I heard somebody in one class mention, especially the non-aggression pact with Poland that he'll sign in a little bit, and the Hossbach Memorandum. That's going to be super important because that's actually going to be used at Nuremberg, which is the post-World War II trial of the living Nazi high command. A lot of them ended up killing themselves after the war, including Himmler, including Hitler, and Goering. Not Goering, Goebbels. Goering is going to be on trial at Nuremberg. All right, so what are we focused on really after 1933? Hitler comes to power in January 30th, 1933 is when he's appointed as chancellor. We talked about that. And by the end of March 1933, the Enabling Act has been passed. Power has essentially been consolidated into the Nazi party hands. So as Hitler is appointed chancellor and as he consolidates and creates Germany into a one-party state, what is the objective here, right? The main objective, and this may be a test question, is to destroy the Versailles peace settlement, to challenge the terms of Versailles, and to really fulfill the promise of the Nazi party, right? We're going to make Germany great again. We're going to push back against what the liberal government did, mainly led by SPD coalitions, in signing the Versailles Treaty, the Diktat is what Hitler refers to it as, and that's super important. First of all, to get his military and armament on the ground that allows for further expansionary wars, and to continue growing support for the Nazi party back at home, right? Even though it becomes a dictatorship, you need to have some sort of support back at home in order to continue functioning, right? So this had to be carried out alongside rearmament, both two things. And obviously, destroying Versailles leads to more rearmament as we move forward, right? So this is achieved between 1933 and 1938, and eventually will set the stage for further territorial claims in the outbreak of general war in Europe in 1939, September 1st, 1939. Okay, so what are the Western powers really doing at this time, right? Germany is has been a Western power for some time, weakened by Versailles, weakened by the liberal government that exists, but with the Nazis in power, they're going to regain some of that prestige that once existed. We know in the East, we have the Soviet Union getting stronger domestically, and we know in the West, we have Britain, France, and the United States. Those are the three big liberal governments that exist. So what are they going through at this point? We know that Britain is a little bit more hesitant to get involved in international affairs. We talked about it on the Italy slideshow, right? Britain's main objective is to maintain the strength of its own empire. And what Germany is doing in Central Europe, and the threat right now is not as severe as it seems to be, right? Hindsight's 2020. We know that Britain thought that some aspects of the Treaty of Versailles were a little bit too harsh. They thought that Germany should not be punished as harshly. So there's some sentiment, especially by conservative British leaders, that, hey, Hitler and the Nazis really aren't asking for much. They're just asking for pieces of territory that have ethnic Germans in it that they lost as a result of the Treaty of Versailles. So that's one thing. They're not really worried about it. It's more of a threat from France than anything else. What their big concern is maintaining that large empire. The sun never sets on the British Empire. So they're way more concerned with Japanese expansion. And we talked about this later on, right? As Japan gets embargoes placed on it, it's really focused on gobbling up all these southeast islands and eventually knocking out the United States naval fleet to gobble up all this stuff. And we know that Britain in the United States and the Netherlands, the Dutch, have territory that are down here. And that's why it's a big concern for them, because this is an expansionary force, an Asian expansionary force that is taking interest in Southeast Asian territory. So that's their big concern, right? Again, I've already hit most of these points. Many resources are overstretched. Main priority was to protect the British Empire. We're also all going through the Great Depression at this time. And obviously, Western governments that operate with the United States, especially trade economically, are greatly impacted. And there's a cascading effect in terms of the United States economy falling apart domestically. So many British politicians, I said this, consider the Treaty of Versailles to be unfair, supported some redress of legitimate grievances. Like I said, right, Germany lost some territory that had ethnic Germans in it, and they had harsh reparations payments, and they had the Article 231, which was basically the war guilt clause, which is what you'll need to know for your Germany test, that basically says you're completely at fault for this war. And British public at the start of the peace settlement is very outraged and wants their piece of flesh. But as time moves forward, they say, hey, we feel a little bit bad for Germany, and so do the British politicians. And again, right-wing leaders in Britain were very sympathetic to Hitler, not because they agreed with racial laws, not because they were anti-democratic. It's just in the eyes of a lot of Western powers, communists were a bigger threat than fascist. Nationalism has been around for a while. Obviously, to this extreme, has not really existed in history. Mussolini is the founder of what fascism is, the ideology itself, right? He gets the credit for it. There is a theorist that plays a role in the shaping of it, but Mussolini gets the credit. So this is a 20th century problem. But the issue is they're focused on dividing based off of nation. And we can understand like national pride, and that at least allows us to have some sort of autonomy, meaning control over ourselves as a nation, rich and poor combined to defend the German territory, to defend the British territory. The communists are focused on a global uprising of the working class. We cannot have that. That will destroy borders. It'll create a globalization like we've never seen before, and the workers will rise up, and there won't be any real countries anymore. It'll be just satellite states of the Soviet Union. So in the eyes of a lot of British conservatives, hey, Hitler acts as a buffer between what Stalin and the Comintern want to do a little bit later on. We know, though, through our study of history, that Stalin's really focused on developing the Soviet Union essentially for its own protection at this point, getting industrialization off the ground through his 5-year plans. Okay, we talked about this as well. France is very focused on protecting itself, and it is concerned about a growing German threat. Once the Nazis come to power, they're like, oh crap, we might be screwed again. This might be a situation where Germany's going to invade through Belgium, just like through the Schlieffen Plan, and invade France. So what you'll see is in the mid-1920s, when they know that the Nazi party is not fully empowered just yet, but they know that there's an emerging far-right nationalist force, they double down, and they develop this thing known as the Maginot Line. So it's in 1929 to 1938 is when they're developing it. So what it is a defensive line and fortress where they're establishing fortifications along the border with Germany. We know that the Rhineland, though, is demilitarized. There is Allied occupation there until, I believe, the year 1929, which was part of the agreement. So I think it's like anything west of the Rhine or 50 kilometers east of the Rhine River must be demilitarized. Germany can't have troops along the border. So France technically has nothing to worry about on paper, but they know that the Nazis are an expansionary force. Fascists are very interested in militarism and using the military as a jumping off point to develop strength for their people and create a strong nation state. So France is very concerned about Germany once the Nazis come to power. But even before that, like I said, when they see nationalist parties rising, they know that the United States isn't there to back them up. Hell, the Senate can't even ratify the Treaty of Versailles, and they know that Britain is very much focused just on maintaining its own empire. And everybody's dealing with the effects of the Great Depression. So France, at least in the late 1920s heading into the 1930s, is very focused on protecting itself from another growing German threat. And again, it all comes down to that Schlieffen Plan. It's something that forms itself, that reappears again and again. So France's objectives are twofold. Defend France's borders as best as possible, even though the Rhineland is not occupied right now by German troops, but has some Allied forces there till 1929, or it might have been 1930. Don't remember off the top of my head. And another thing, form alliances with countries to the east of Germany to basically threaten Germany's eastern border. Because, again, they don't want to get involved in a war on two fronts. It all comes back, baby. That's what happens, right? So you get that little entente, which is Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia, right? So we want to make sure Germany, number one, we protect our border over here, France, and then number two, we get allies on our side. And they'll also have an agreement, which I say right here, with Poland as well. So Poland, and then the little entente of Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia. So Czechoslovakia, Romania, Yugoslavia. The whole objective is threaten Germany. Threaten Germany as much as you can. Not obviously directly, but having your allies back you up here, especially Poland being a threat, because Poland and France surround Germany, and Germany does not want to see itself overtaken. So that's the objective there. What are we doing? What is the United States doing? Well, we don't want to get involved in foreign affairs. We are isolationist. We lived through World War I. We think that Europe is the sick man of the world, right? As this political cartoon, which I've showed you before from Dr. Seuss is, right? It's got Hitleritis, Stalinich, Blitzbox, Nazi fever, fascist fever. It's got all these problems. And throughout most of world history, we have seen Europe constantly fighting with each other, whether it's religious wars or wars based off of nationalism. It's existed forever. So we don't want anything to do with this. We're also going through the Great Depression. Our job is to fix our domestic economy. That's why FDR gets his job. His job is not to be focused on foreign affairs. His job is to be focused on improving the domestic economy, and that is his main objective through his New Deal, right? Those are those social welfare programs, as well as just programs in general to uplift the communities in the United States, whether it's the Works Progress Administration or the Civilian Conservation Corps or the Tennessee Valley Authority, trying to get men to work back domestically. We know that Britain and France are relatively militarily weak. They do not have the funds to spend on defense as of right now and rearmament for themselves, so we're not going to back them up in this situation, because if they're not ready to fight, we're not going to waste our time on this. The League has also failed to deal with Japan at that point in 1933. We saw what happened with the Manchurian crisis. The Leighton Report basically said, you did a bad thing. And then Japan's like, deuces, we're done. So we know that the international community is not really, collective security is not working. Collective security is not working in dealing with threats, and we know by 1935 it is definitely not effective dealing with Mussolini either. And we are living in an environment that's not ready to deal with international crises, that is really focused on improving the lives of people domestically, and is that hodgepodge of different factors, right? It's World War I and the end result of that, and people fatigued from war, and the fact that your war economy collapses because you're no longer at war. You don't need to produce as much stuff. Number two, the Great Depression affecting people, and people just wanting to make sure social welfare stays, right? And there's also this aspect of this too, where there has been revisions to Versailles to a certain extent. Britain and France evacuated the Rhineland in between 1929 and 1930, and basically for Germany, reparation payments effectively canceled at the Lausanne Conference in 1932. So the big thing for us, though, why we stay isolationist is the Great Depression. And we don't want to get involved in European war. And they're just like with the Iraq war in 2003, how like the whole thing, the joke is Dick Cheney made money off the Iraq war because he worked for Halliburton, which was like this defense company, and he wanted oil. That was the big thing in terms of our involvement in there. Similar vibe in the 1930s for the United States. There's a lot of people within Congress and the civilian population that think we only got involved in World War I for resources. That was it. And it was for defense contractors to make a boatload of money. And there will be some defense contractors put on trial there. But besides the point. So there's a lot of factors that are playing a role in the fact that, hey, we're not going to respond to German expansion. Seems like Germany, at least when it was under Stresemann, it looked like things were improving there. Yes, Hitler's coming to power, but we have no desire to get involved in foreign affairs. And there's a multitude of reasons as to why from various countries. All right, so the big thing for Hitler between the years 33 and 38 is he cannot afford to deal with international backlash. The reason why is Germany's not ready for war. You saw the harsh constraints on them because of the Treaty of Versailles. We know that through the Rapallo treaties, they were already essentially rearming, which you saw the Soviet Union was allowing them to train some soldiers on Soviet territory and get some of those aircraft that they're not allowed to have for the Air Force, but they're relatively weak, and they have to deal with a economic crisis in the Great Depression. The Nazis have to prove that they're better than the liberal government at governing and providing people jobs. And they have to make sure that, again, the military can rebuild with a certain amount of time. They can't tick anybody off. If they do, it's going to be a problem. And they are not ready to get involved in a war just yet. So basically, publicly, Hitler is going to claim to desire peace, work carefully to diffuse any potential opposition, but at the same time, he's going to work to undermine collective security, right? So Germany is going to start to withdraw from multi-country agreements, multilateral agreements, because it's easier to break bilateral agreements, and that's what he's going to prefer during this time. His job as objectives as well is to isolate France as much as possible, try to get Britain on their side, try to get Italy on their side, try to make agreements with some Eastern European nations that are on your eastern border that may be friendly with France, like Poland at that time, and effectively challenge Versailles and increase his own power. All these things are his objectives up to this point. Okay, so one of the big things is, according to Article 8 of the Covenant of the League of Nations, which is something I would probably know, in Article 16, demanded that national armaments be reduced to the lowest point consistent with national safety. And we will have a disarmament conference in Geneva of 1933. There was no real agreement into how this would be achieved. And Hitler is going to have government representatives there. I don't remember if he is there for this particular conference, but he is there at the disarmament conferences. And don't think he has any intention to actually disarm. This is twofold again, right? Prove that he is a willing player on the international stage to not face drastic backlash, but also use this as a jumping off point to get more aggressive with rearmament. Because he knows France is concerned with their growing power and what the Nazis proclaim with, and he knows that Britain is sympathetic to their causes, right? So what Germany is looking for is Germany is looking to get an agreement with Britain and France that, and this was an agreement that was proposed by previous governments before Hitler came into power, that basically, and it's written right here, Germany will participate in disarmament only if other countries reduced armaments to Germany's level or allowed Germany to rearm to theirs. France, we know, is not a fan of Germany. They've had beef for a long time, and they are very concerned, and I'll keep saying it till the cows come home, with an aggressive German government that is in power now. So they're like, hell no, we are not going to agree with this. You also lost the war. It's your own damn fault that you're in that position. We are not agreeing to these terms. And Hitler basically goes, if they're not going to agree, they're a threat to us. And if they're a threat to us, we obviously have the right to rearm. So he says, again, what he says in this situation is, if France is refusing to disarm, and Britain is a little bit more open to it, but France is thoroughly against it, this is a conspiracy that France is going to eventually want to invade us. So we have the right to self-defense. We have the right to rearm. And because of this, it seems like the League of Nations won't protect us at all, because nobody's agreeing with the terms of the League of Nations. And the fact that, and again, remember, Germany joins the League of Nations, I believe, in 1926 under Stresemann, but it joins the League of Nations. He's going to pull out in the same exact disarmament conference. So he leaves the conference, and he leaves the League of Nations, because he says they're not disarming. They want us weak because they want to destroy us and dominate us, and we can't have that. And he has a vote, essentially. Oh, there it is. Organization part of French conspiracy to keep Germany weak. The League of Nations as well. So November 1933, there will be a plebiscite, which is a referendum on an issue within Germany regarding his pulling out of Germany from the Treaty of Versailles, from the League of Nations and from the Disarmament Conference, and it gets 95% approval. Okay, and this is a great public strategy for Hitler as well. First of all, again, he goes to the conference. It makes him look like he's legitimately concerned with disarmament and that he wants to disarm. He knows France is going to resist, and that gives him the jumping off point to say, France wants to eventually invade us. France wants us weak because they want to hurt us. So we have the right to defend ourselves, especially because France is one of the leaders of the League of Nations. So we're going to pull out of both of these. And then he goes home and he basically says, hey, let's have a vote. Do you all agree with this? And 95% of the people agree. Obviously, voting can be slightly rigged because we're under an authoritarian state at this point. But the point being is this. He is also proving himself domestically. I am making Germany great again. I'm removing us from these multilateral constraints, these multilateral organizations that want to keep Germany weak. I'm making us strong. So it's great for public sentiment as well. I'm going to skip over this political cartoon and focus on everything else. Another thing he's focused on is, again, he's focused on, because France has all these buddies now, especially Czechoslovakia, Romania, Yugoslavia, and Poland. He wants to make France a little bit more nervous. And he wants to protect his eastern border so he can focus on being more aggressive with nations that are neighboring in the south, for instance, like eventually Czechoslovakia and Austria. And he also wants to threaten France by basically saying, hey, those agreements that you have with countries like Poland, they don't exist, and I'm creating a loophole. I mean, they exist, but I'm creating a loophole that basically says that they're not going to attack me, so your whole little plan of surrounding me with the different alliances, it ain't going to work for you, buddy. So, and now I'm on the wrong side. Here we are. So Germany's withdrawal from the League of Nations set back for the concept of collective security. We said that. Germans' rearmament and the League of Nations failure to stop it, it does make Poland nervous to a certain extent. And because of this, there's twofold, right? The things I just said about weakening France's allies to their east, and also on top of that, pulling out of the League of Nations and the rearmament makes Poland nervous and kind of forces them into the arms of Germany to make sure that they don't invade. So they signed a 10-year non-aggression pact with each other in Germany in 1934. And again, this takes the entire world by surprise. And I got to find the map. It's somewhere on this slideshow, maybe a little bit earlier. Maybe actually a little bit earlier. I think it's a little bit earlier, if I can find it. Maybe it's not even in this slideshow at all. That'd be great. Point being is there is a western portion of Poland that is taken from Germany in the Treaty of Versailles that has a lot of ethnic Germans in it that was added. Here it is. So this whole territory over here has a lot of ethnic Germans in it, but it was added to Poland to create a new Poland. So Germany's very much interested in reunifying with that and taking that territory. But the Polish are definitely worried about that happening. So that's another motivation for signing this pact, is to basically avoid that happening for a little while. And a lot of people were shocked by this agreement because they thought, hey, Germany's going to eventually want to invade Poland. They want those ethnic Germans back in their territory. Why the hell did Poland make this agreement? And like I said, it says it there. Germany's so upset by the loss of Western Prussia buffer zone, unwillingness to guarantee Western borders of Germany for the Locarno Treaty. But the big thing is, and that's another thing that you should remember. Remember the Locarno Treaty that reaffirmed Western borders with France and the western portion of Germany. But remember, they weren't eager to do anything about Poland just yet. Now there's an agreement basically that reaffirms the eastern borders of Germany and the western border of Poland. But anyway, the big whole objective here is that when France signs this alignment with agreement with Poland, to the entire international community, it looks like, hey, Hitler is a player on the world stage, and he's actually a relatively peaceful player. He's making an agreement with a country that, based off of Nazi ideology, we thought that they were going to want to take over, and he's signing a non-aggression pact with them for 10 years. So at least until 1944, looks like Germany's not going to invade Poland. Looks like Hitler is true. There's only certain things that he's going to push for at the start. He's an international player. He's signing literal agreements with these countries. Looks great. But the real objective here is this: make France nervous. Focus on dealing with really Czechoslovakia and Austria are your two interests. Then you'll focus on potentially taking over France to weaken France, and then refocus on taking Poland and the Soviet Union a little bit later on. But the point being is France signed an agreement with Poland to threaten Germany, and now that agreement is essentially weakened. So you make France even more concerned. So the objective is still look peaceful on the world stage, look like you're holding hands, singing Kumbaya, doing things to make people not so nervous about what you're doing. Yes, you want to avenge some parts of the Treaty of Versailles, but Poland, you got nothing to worry about, but at the same time making France even more concerned. And again, we know this from Hitler, right? There is no desire to keep this agreement. The reason why he loves bilateral agreements, they're easy to break, and the reason he's doing this is because he has a step-by-step process that he's following. His objective is not to maintain this agreement. He wants that western portion of Poland. He wants to see Poland entirely eliminated. The objective here is essentially to focus on his main goals. Oh, it also threatens Czechoslovakia, too. And it seems like Poland, if Germany were to do something about Czechoslovakia, which is this country right over here in this multicolored country, that Poland won't do anything in response. Because Poland's actually interested, if you notice, see how it's a multi-ethnic country? We know that's a problem throughout history. And we got some Poles living in this northern portion of Czechoslovakia. So by having this agreement with Germany, a non-aggression pact, if Germany wants to go into Czechoslovakia, Poland won't do anything to stop it. And on top of that, Germany could get the Saarland, which has this whole area in purple that has ethnic Germans in it. And Poland, if Germany were to invade, Germany might give Poland the part that has the ethnic Poles in it. So these are all areas of interest. Okay, so remember that. Non-aggression pact with Poland is not just because he loves Poland and he wants to protect the Poles. It's because he's being strategic here. And there's multitudes of reasons as to why. And Czechoslovakia will be of interest for him to take over to a certain extent. You know this whole story already. Mussolini and Austria, this whole thing, right? So June 1934, Mussolini and Hitler are going to meet each other finally, and the meeting does not go as planned. Mussolini is Hitler's hero to a certain extent, but when they meet each other, they're not impressed with each other. And there will be a conversation there where Hitler basically says, hey, can you let Austria become a satellite state? And Mussolini says, hell no. He doesn't directly say this, but the whole point is it's supposed to serve as a buffer zone between them, Italy, and Germany. So he's not interested in unification, the Anschluss, which is something you also need to know for your test. He wants to keep it as a buffer. But you know that there is a Nazi party within Austria because there are ethnic Germans in Austria that want to be unified with Germany. They want to see Austria not only just become a satellite state of Germany, but be fully enveloped into Germany. So Hitler supported the Austrian party led by Alfred Eduard Frauenfeld, and there is an Austrian chancellor in power, Engelbert Dollfuss, and you know that there is a attempted coup by Austrian Nazis, including the party leader, to overthrow the Austrian government that's basically autonomous under Engelbert Dollfuss. And you know that Engelbert Dollfuss is assassinated. And Mussolini is like, brother, this is definitely just not the work of that Nazi party that's there. They want to be unified with you. This is your fault, Hitler. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send 100,000 troops through the Brenner Pass, which is this area that allows you to pass through Italy into Austria. And then I'm going to put troops along the Austrian border with Germany. Mussolini is forced to back down because, remember, his objective from those years is basically he has to rebuild Germany from the ground up, especially the rearmament that was restricted because of the Treaty of Versailles. He is not in a position to push his luck in this situation, so he backs off. Obviously, this wasn't necessarily fully Hitler's fault. It was the Nazi party, but obviously if he's backing the Nazi party in Austria, it is technically his fault. So Hitler's forced to disown the actions and play the waiting game for unification with Austria, and the right-wing politician Kurt von Schuschnigg, which we're going to talk about later, we're going to bring him up in the next presentation, took over and stabilized the Austrian regime. So this is a nice further map that allows you to see the Brenner Pass and basically Mussolini moving those troops in. And remember, June 1934. Okay, the Saar plebiscite, January 1935. The Saar is this coal-rich region of Germany, right over here, really in Alsace-Lorraine, but it has ethnic Germans that live in it. There's a lot of ethnic Germans that live there. It's very rich in coal, just like the Ruhr. So Rhineland's over here, Ruhr's over here, Saar's over here. But the whole point of the Saar is that it's supposed to be under the control of the League of Nations for 15 years. So January 1935, we've essentially hit the 15-year mark, while France got to extract the value of the coal produced there for its economy to pay back for reparations. As of 1935, so 15 years after the Treaty of Versailles, the Saar was supposed to have a plebiscite, so hold a vote of the people in the Saar, giving them the options of, do you want to stay under the occupation and control of the League of Nations? Do you want to run into the arms of France? Or do you want to run into the arms of Germany? And shocker, there's a lot of ethnic Germans that live there. And this one is a completely, totally fair vote because this is under the operation of the League of Nations. 90% agreement that the Saar should return to Germany. So once again, Hitler is getting this propaganda extravaganza. He pulls out in 33 from the League of Nations and from the Disarmament Conference, says I'm going to defend Versailles. Not defend Versailles, but repeal what's happened with Versailles, and the people vote, and they know that Hitler is on the way up in terms of ripping apart everything from the Versailles Treaty. 90% vote to reunify with Germany. Huge victory. Lots of political capital from this. So here's the vote, right? Unification of Germany, 90.73, so really 91. Maintaining the status quo, so staying with the League of Nations was about 9%. Unification with France, look at that, less than 1%. That's concerning. And out of the total vote, you have total turnout was 97.99% of the eligible voting population. So this is a huge victory for Hitler in terms of the Saar reunifying. With Germany. So the Saar, as of January 1935, is back in Germany's hands. And the whole objective between 33 to 38 is we're also focused not only on repealing the Treaty of Versailles, but also on rearmament. So again, Hitler makes the quote in February 1933. He told his generals that rearmament was the most pressing priority. The next 5 years must be devoted to the defense capacity of the German people. And we know, and I mentioned this earlier in this presentation, Germany has always ignored some elements of the Treaty of Versailles, whether it's their inability to pay, but more importantly, from that Rapallo Treaty that was agreed upon with the Soviets and the Germans. The Soviets and Germans kind of reconciled with each other, had agreements with each other, and the Soviets allowed for the Germans to redevelop their air force to a certain extent and train some soldiers on Soviet territory. But what you're going to see between 33 and really 38 is a dramatic increase in terms of German production really happening behind the scenes, right? Because it's harder, much harder to send spies in and to report on secrets during this time period. And Germany is rearming behind the scenes, also somewhat explicitly. So from 1935, between 33 to 35, the army is going to increase from 7 to 21 divisions. By the end of 35, you're going to have conscription introduced. So the draft will start. The army is going to increase to 36 divisions and have over 500,000 men within its forces. That's up from 100,000 in the Treaty of Versailles. We're up to 500,000. So 500,000. In March 1935, Hermann Goering. Hermann Goering is second in command to Adolf Hitler. He's also the commander. He's a Reich Marshal. He is technically the president of the Reichstag, per se. So he's the leader of like the Reichstag, even though really Hitler's the true leader. And he's also the commander of the Luftwaffe. And he tells the public finally in March 1935, hey, there is a Luftwaffe, there is an Air Force. We have around 2,500 planes. So the whole rationale behind this entire rearmament is, hey, Britain and France didn't disarm. We have to protect ourselves from these Western nations, particularly France, because France was not interested at all in trying to meet our demands in terms of disarmament. So we have to protect ourselves. That's why we're doing this. We aren't doing this to be an expansionary force. We are purely doing this for defensive measures. You know that is a lie, but that is his position to show the international community I'm not being unreasonable. I'm just being realistic and trying to protect my people from force. And this is a map of what the world looks like at that point. Okay, anyway, point being, early 1936, Hitler's going to turn his attention to the Rhineland. And the real reason why is because we got a crisis with Abyssinia happening at the same time. Because October 3rd, 1935, Mussolini invades Abyssinia. And you know about the Laval Pact that was being negotiated behind the scenes. Yes, sanctions were also put into place, but the sanctions didn't target goods that helped prepare for war. And on top of that, behind the scenes, Britain and France are making the league look weak by trying to basically negotiate the rights of Ethiopia away to the Italians, while saving face for themselves. So the whole thing's falling apart. But the big thing is Hitler also wants to remilitarize the Rhineland, and his objective, and again, the Rhineland's right over here, that western border with Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. The whole objective is we need to remilitarize and rearm this area with German soldiers for our own protection. The French developed the Maginot Line. They're protecting their border. We have the right to defend that border, right? That's what they're arguing. And why in 1936 again? Why rearmament and occupation? Distraction from the emerging economic issues in Germany. There is some economic issues with rising food prices and food shortages. The Abyssinian crisis, like I just said, provided an ideal opportunity to take action. Britain and France are in disarray. League of Nations looks particularly weak. This is a gamble that Hitler's willing to take because of this. There is also the Franco-Soviet Mutual Assistance Treaty, which is ratified on March 4th, 1936, that they'll agree to help each other out if an aggressor goes after them. This is another cause for concern and another way for Hitler to go, hey, France is an aggressor here. They developed the Maginot Line. They're trying to, again, create a war on two fronts with us. Poland abandoned them, and now they're reaching out to the Soviet Union. This violates the spirit of the Locarno Act because, again, they already threatened the western borders by putting that Maginot Line there, and it's threatening Germany with encirclement. So we have the right to take over the Rhineland, which, again, is this area right here. Hitler's generals, even himself to a certain extent, were very hesitant about this whole entire process. They were worried that, yes, Britain and France are occupied with what Italy is doing, and the Hossbach Memorandum, not Hossbach Memorandum, sorry guys, the Laval Pact fell apart, and Britain and France are, again, in crisis mode. They're dealing with internal issues, particularly France with its own political system, but they're thinking, hey, if we invade here and Britain and France actually respond, we are not ready to fight them. We will have to walk out with our tail tucked between our legs. Hitler says right before the invasion on March 7th, 1936, the 48 hours after, well, I should say after, the 48 hours after the march into the Rhineland were the most nerve-wracking of my life. If the French had marched into the Rhineland, we would have had to withdraw with our tails between our legs, like I just said, right? This is a gamble. Because if Britain and France, like I said, respond, they are not ready just yet to deal with any sort of armed conflict with Britain and France. So Britain and France are not surprised by this. They had intelligence that was telling them, hey, this is going to happen. And Germany's military force, I think they only walked in with, it might have been 30,000, might have been way less than that in terms of troops. But they walk in, and Britain and France don't do a damn thing about it. And Hitler occupies the region, and he basically tells the British and the French, I'm only doing this for my protection. We're going to stay here for a while. But hey, I'm willing to renegotiate and potentially demilitarize the Rhineland once again if we can figure out how to rework the terms of the Locarno treaties and get France to calm down or possibly disarm just like us. And the reason why he wants to show again, I'm a real player on the international stage. I'm not a threat to anybody. I'm just trying to protect Germany and make Germany respected again to a certain extent on the world stage. I'm not looking to be fully expansionary. I just want Germany to get what's rightfully its and to protect its territories from potential threats. You know that's not his objective, but that's what he's saying out there. Okay, Spanish Civil War time. Spanish Civil War is going to begin in 1936. You know Mussolini gets involved. He puts ground troops there. Germany's going to get involved as well. And Spain is of vital interest to them because of the fact that Spain, you can put a lot of naval ports along the Spanish coast. And on top of that, the strait right here, you want to be able to get your ships through and control this and control access to the Mediterranean. That's your objective, okay? So this whole Spanish Civil War, we're going to talk about it in more detail, is going to be General Francisco Franco, and his nationalist forces and the Republican government that exists. So you're going to see the military revolt against the Republican government that's led by a popular front. So it's got a lot of different political parties on the left that are leading the government. So Franco's nationalists are supported by Germany and Italy, and the Republican government, even though it wants to help with Britain and France, it's not going to get it. It's mainly going to be supported by the Soviet Union. Hitler, again, does not send ground troops in, but this is an opportunity for him to get another ally in the West and an opportunity for him to test run some of the things that will come from an eventual global conflict. So he plays a key role in transporting Franco's troops from Spanish Morocco to Spain to start the conflict. His German bombers of the Condor Legion are going to cause havoc. He gets to see what will happen when you bomb civilian forces with a much more advanced air force than from World War I. The big place was Guernica in April 1937, which I have that painting of from Picasso on the next slide. German submarines also attack Spanish government ships in the Mediterranean, but the big point is Spanish Civil War, Mussolini is going to put more troops in there. He's going to waste more resources. But number two, it's going to push Mussolini and Hitler closer to each other as a result. And here's Pablo Picasso's Guernica, which is a very intense painting, which I, again, had to analyze when I was in college. So, again, reasons for joining the war. Wanted friendly government in Spain that would supply Spanish mineral sources and also provide military bases for German submarines. He would be able to test out his air force, like we said. He does that really in Guernica. He was able to pose as a defender of European civilization against the communist threat, and a pro-fascist government in Spain would further undermine French security. Why? Because if you look at the global map, look where Spain is. Here's France. Fascist government here, fascist government here, neutral government here, fascist government here, gives you the opportunity to attack later on. So what are the effects? There's a 3-year engagement in this war. Again, it becomes a testing ground for German force that they're going to use in World War II. It does weaken Italy to a certain extent. He learns, though, and we'll learn later on, that Britain and France do not come to the rescue of the Spanish Republican government. Stalin does. And it allows Hitler and Mussolini to look like the defenders again against communism. And Britain and France question Stalin's motives to be involved in Spain, because it is a popular front government at this time, so it's got some communists and socialists that are a part of it. What's his true objective? So the Spanish Civil War kind of weakens Britain, France, and Russia's potential at all unification, and brings Germany and Italy closer to each other. Right. So, again, I say it right here. So diplomatic alignments were improved in the relations between Hitler and Mussolini. Hitler's going to recognize King Victor Emmanuel III as Emperor of Abyssinia and worked with Italy to prevent the British, I don't know why it says initiative, to update the Locarno treaties. Opposition, this is another big thing with this involvement in the Spanish Civil War. Mussolini's going to give the hint and the nudge that he doesn't really care what happens in Austria. He does want Austria to be mostly independent still, but he's okay with it being a satellite state of Germany. So there's agreement between Engelbert Dollfuss, Schuschnigg, which is the new, because Dollfuss is dead, Schuschnigg and Hitler, that basically says, hey, You get to be independent. Traditionally, you get to be the leader of the country, but you are going to operate the country based on the principle that Austria acknowledges herself to be a German state. This does not mean Mussolini wanted him to go in and fully annex and take over Austria. He just basically said, I'll allow you to have a lot of influence there because I trust you now. We're more buddy-buddy. Other things. October 1936, you get your Rome-Berlin Axis. I told you about this. This is their Treaty of Friendship. This is basically them outlining what their mutual interests are. This is not a defensive treaty. So it does not mean that they're going to jump in and defend each other in terms of war. All that it means is, hey, we have mutual interests and we will try to support our mutual interests as best as possible. We're going to be friendly with each other. You get the Anti-Comintern Pact in November of 1936. The original two agreeers here are going to be Japan and Nazi Germany. So Italy does not join until November of 1937. That's a key point you need to remember. But the whole point is, communists are a threat. The Comintern, Communist International, wants to spread communism. We can't allow that. So the agreement is that in case of a Soviet attack, nations would safeguard their common interest, and Italy will join it later on. The Tripartite Pact, which I mentioned when we talked about Japan, and we'll mention again a little bit later on, expands that to basically say we'll protect each other if another nation attacks one of us. And on top of that, it basically says each of us has our own sphere of influence that we get to have control over. But the big thing is, because of the Spanish Civil War, and as we're moving into the mid-1930s, Hitler's not alone anymore. He has true allies that are emerging, and he's starting to rearm at a very, very aggressive pace, and it will get more aggressive as time moves forward with the 4-year plan. Germany's economy, and I'm sorry that I keep fixing the slideshows, it's just bothering me a little bit. Germany's economy, once Hitler came into power, was operated under this thing known as a new plan, and was run by a economic minister named Dr. Schott. And his whole objective here is provide stability to the German economy, allow us to get natural resources that will allow us to, well, I should say this first. Germany has natural resources, but it doesn't have like a metric ton of resources. So it still needs to bring in a lot of resources in terms of oil and the like for war. But it does have a lot more than Italy does at this point. Schott's objective here is to give working class people a better chance to survive, focus somewhat on rearmament, but really focused on, it's twofold. It's really economic stability and somewhat rearmament. So what is objective here is you're going to barter. We're going to exchange things of equal value. We're going to bring back some natural resources. In return, we're going to produce manufactured products, somewhat for rearmament, but another to export to other countries and import goods that are in desperate need. We're going to limit what's being imported. We're going to be somewhat self-sufficient, but we're really going to focus on exporting goods that we can make money off of and help the local economies and allow people to lower the price of goods by importing some things and not allowing a limited access to things that were imported originally. So you get cheap food, more money to purchase raw materials, increase trade with Central and Eastern European states. But the issue is there is some economic faltering that occurs under this, but by the time we get to 1936, Hitler wants more. He doesn't just want to be producing and focusing on maintaining a stable economy. His whole thing is, we don't need to trade with other countries. We can just go in other countries and take their territory, gain that Lebensraum, that living space, and then whatever is there, use those natural resources to make our own goods. We can have an autarky, so we can be self-sufficient. So Schott's going to be pushed to the side, and Hermann Goering, our buddy, is going to be put in power as the economic minister after Schott's going to resign a little bit later on and creates the 4-year plan. So this is different in the sense of we're not just focused on also manufacturing goods that we could sell to other countries. We are now going to solely be focused on the manufacturing effort. So for rearmament, so building tanks, building planes, we're going to be focused on creating synthetic resources that we don't have access to, like synthetic oil and synthetic rubber. Bilateral trade agreements with states in Eastern and Southeastern Europe still exist, but much more focused on self-sufficiency and production of armaments. Big difference is new plan is focused on helping the economy, bartering, so again, trading one good for another, but trading manufactured goods, sometimes in exchange for money, really focused on economic development, but also somewhat rearmament. 4-year plan is strictly focused on, we're going to be more self-sufficient, we are going to produce our own goods, we're going to rely less and less on trade, and we're going to focus on rearmament. So this is the real turning point, is 1936, in terms of why Germany is going to get more aggressive. The issue is with the 4 years. So he says the intention that within 4 years, 2 main tasks had to be achieved: that Germany's armed forces were operational and that the economy must be fit for war within 4 4 years. So the issue is, under Goering, not all those objectives were reached, although in such areas as aluminum production, explosives, coal, mineral and oil, the increases were definitely impressive. But the issue is, you are still going to be reliant on for 1/3 of your raw materials from other countries. So that's going to play a role in Germany using blitzkrieg tactics. So what that is that is a situation where you are going to, it's lightning war. That's what it is. So you're going to quickly strike. We'll go over it when we cover World War II. Quickly take the territory and focus on what you need to take, and then eventually open up new fronts later on. That's your objective. Number two, consumer economy is going to be greatly hurt by this. In terms of spending, in terms of real wages are going to be stuck. Inflation is going to rise because you're going to stop importing things that you are limited with, and you're going to be focused in terms of consumer goods. You're going to be more focused on rearmament. But the issue is, even though that's happening, Germans are getting more and more jobs because rearmament allows you to do that. And because of this, especially because Weimar Republic was a disaster, people are being put to work. They don't mind what's going on. Okay, last 2 slides for this lecture. Really 3, because I'm going to go over the themes down here, or 4. In November 5th, 1937, you're going to get this thing called the Hossbach Memorandum. And what this is, so at the same time, 4-year plan is in place. Nazis have much more friendly allies, and they challenged some aspects of the Treaty of Versailles. And they have allies in terms of Japan, and it looks like Italy's on their side, and Spanish Civil War has been a great representative for them. This Hossbach Memorandum is going to be a meeting of some of the chief architects of the Nazi regime, as well as old school military officials that played a large role in how the military operated. And they're going to meet in a location, and at this meeting, Hitler's going to claim this is his last will and testament. He's going to lay out his plans. That's what he's going to do. He's going to lay out his plans in terms of what is the objective by 1943 to 1945. And the only reason why we have information on this is because his military assistant, Colonel Hossbach, was taking notes on this meeting, and then eventually wrote his notes down into a whole memorandum. So at the conference, Hitler states how it is the aim of German foreign policy to make secure and preserve the racial community and enlarge it. And how are we going to do this? We are going to take Austria, and we are going to take Czechoslovakia, and this is preferably going to be done before Britain and France could fully rearm themselves. But if they do rearm, we have to be ready to fight them, and we have to have rearmament at the levels that we're supposed to. Reason why they're concerned about Britain and France rearming and responding is because Britain and France are supposed to be the protectors of Europe, and eventually the fading isolationism will fade. They'll be more interested in collective security later on. So this is Hitler laying out his plan for, we're going to get living space for our people by taking over Austria and Czechoslovakia, and we could expand later on, but our objective is, we know that by doing this expansionary stuff, Austria might not be a concern, Czechoslovakia will definitely be concerned by the international community. There will be some sort of response, and by 1943 to 1945, we'll be fully ready for war, and hopefully we'll attack before German rearmament and French rearmament happens. The military officials at this time were not like, there is still a large segment of them. So Blomberg, who's the Minister of Defense, and Fritsch, who's the Minister of the Army, the Commander-in-Chief of the German Army, are old school Prussian aristocrats that have been in the military for a long time. They don't really have issue with taking over Czechoslovakia. They don't have an issue with the Anschluss. What they do have an issue with is doing this way too far in advance. And they think that they might need even more time than 1943 to 1945 to launch this. And they want to be cautious and careful, and they don't want to enact a global conflict. And Hitler doesn't want to hear it from them at this point. So by early 1938, so this Hossbach Memorandum is being done on November 5th, 1937, Hitler and his top aides like Himmler and Goering are going to work to get these guys out of power. So there's going to be this thing known as a Blomberg-Fritsch affair, where one is going to be, Blomberg's wife is going to be accused essentially of pornography, which is, and I think cheating on him through falsities made by Goering and Himmler. It's going to be published, and then he's going to be forced to resign, and Fritsch is going to be basically accused by Himmler and Goering as being a homosexual. So they end up in controversial affairs. They get removed from power. This will be also accompanied with the retirement of 16 high-ranking officials. These are all old-school German officers, and the transfer of 44 others. Why is this significant? The whole thing. Number one, Hossbach Memorandum in general basically says Germany is out for a war of aggression. That plays a large role in how they're going to prosecute the Nazis later on. Number two, and I'll leave this to the next slide, but I'm going to quickly bring it up. When these two resign, Hitler is no longer constrained. He's going to name himself Supreme Commander of the German Army. So now he no longer has to be tepid and timid, and rearmament's going to happen as it is happening at a much faster level, and he's going to truly start his wars of aggression. So what are the components of German expansion from 33 to 38? Challenged, undermined, and blocked some aspects of the Treaty of Versailles and things that Britain and France are doing. The Saar plebiscite, German rearmament in general, remilitarization of the Rhineland all happened within those years, 35 and 36 in particular. Spanish Civil War allows them to show their strength. Certain agreements with some countries allow them to get away with some stuff, and the Hossbach Memorandum is pretty much where they're going to lay out their war of expansion. So that's it in a little bit more detail, right? So Disarm League withdraws, Poland Non-Aggression Pact, Anschluss is blocked for a little bit. So that's part of the problem that he's going to encounter. And sorry, guys, it's bothering me how this is, like, shaped. But anyway, point being, Saar plebiscite, Saar's return to Germany via plebiscite, dramatic arms increase, protect yourself from the Soviet Union and France, Spanish Civil War, spread fascism, test Luftwaffe, Mussolini and Hitler, Japan against the Soviet Union, and reaffirms foreign policy and ideology by the time we get to late 1937, early 1938. So that's that. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions, comments, or concerns.